Hi everyone, I'm Rincey and this is Rincey Reads. So today I'm going to be doing a May reading wrap up. I basically didn't make any content in the month of May because a little bit busy at the beginning of the month, so I kind of skipped the first week and then everyone in my family got sick, or immediate family got sick, including myself, and I'm just now starting to feel like a normal human being again. And since it's the end of the month, I figured I would just do a nice reading wrap up to talk about the 4 books that I was able to finish over the course of the month. Pretty strong reading month for me. Some of these I wanted to do individual reviews on, but it's just, I don't have time at this point. And so I'd rather just wrap up the month and keep moving forward. You know what I mean? So yeah, just gonna jump right into the books that I read. So first up, I have The Star from Calcutta. This is the 5th book in the, I guess they call it Mystery of 1920s India, the Parveen mystery series. The first book in the series was The Widows of Malabar Hill. I talk about this series a lot on my channel because I'm a big fan of it. It's a historical mystery series taking place in 1920s Bombay. You are following this woman named Parveen Mystery, who is basically the first female lawyer in India, or in Bombay, I should say. I don't know if it's all of India. And so she works at a firm with her father, and a mystery takes place in every book. In this one, you are following her father and Praveen as they are looking into or working with this movie studio head. His wife, Roshana, is a famous Indian actress, and she recently left her old studio to join her husband's studio, and they originally get hired to look into sort of her contract, if she even has one, to make sure that the old studio doesn't have any sort of recourse, trying to get her back or pay anything for leaving or anything along those lines. And then when investigating these things, she ends up going to a special screening that they're having for their latest movie, with Roshana, and at the end of all of the events that happen over the course of that night, a movie censor is found dead on the grounds. And so that sort of becomes the central mystery of what's going on there. So that's the basic synopsis for this mystery. This is the 5th book in the series. I would not say to pick up this book if you haven't read other books in the series, because I kind of think it's the weakest so far. I just feel like I didn't really love this book the way that I love other books in this series. There's a few different reasons for this, partially because one of the side characters, Alice, who is British, or Indian British, white girl. She's supposedly Parveen's best friend and things like that. She treats Parveen terribly throughout this book. It acts so selfishly and things like that. And it's slightly understood, but also I was just so annoyed by her. Parveen also just comes across as very whiny in this book, in my opinion. She does have things to complain about, but it feels like she spends a lot of this book sort of being down on herself and stuff like that. And that happens. Just not super fun to read about. So yeah, I would say if this is a series that you've been interested in, start from the beginning. They do build upon it in the way that they slowly add information about characters. There's character developments with some of the side characters and things like that. And so I think it's worth it to start from the beginning and move forward. I do think this is the weakest out of the series. And so if you're someone who's been following the series, I don't think it's worth necessarily skipping, but I won't say it's necessarily my favorite. But not all of them can be 4 or 5 stars. Yeah, it was fine. The mystery was interesting. I definitely didn't see sort of where the plot developments were going, what was going to happen and all of that stuff. But I just think everything else around it just sort of brought the story down a bit. So yeah, it was a 3-star experience for me. Not terrible, but not amazing like some of the other ones were for me. The next book I finished was Leave Your Mess at Home by Tolani Akinola. This book I love. So in this story, you are following a handful of Nigerian American siblings. You have the oldest son who, is put on a pedestal sort of by the parents, and he's married and about to have a kid with a Latin American woman. I can't remember exactly what she is, what her background is. And then there is the oldest daughter who has kind of become the black sheep in the family, and you find out what happens over the course of the book. And she's been kind of disowned, and so she left the house and moved to LA, and now she's back in Chicago. There is the next daughter, who's kind of the golden child. She's gone to med school and in her residency and doing those sorts of things, and like tries her best to like live up to that like sort of like perfect golden child expectation. And then there's the youngest daughter who is in college. I think she's either a sophomore or junior in college, and she's kind of going through her own identity crisis and unsure of like who she is and how she feels in her own self-image and things like that. And so when the oldest daughter, Sola, returns home, things kind of like start moving, and like people are forced to confront their own sort of situations, the family life, things along those lines. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed my experience with this book. Like every chapter is told from a different sibling's point of view. And if you know me, you know that like multiple POV books typically don't work well for me, but this one worked really, really well. I think it's because every sibling feels very well established. They all sort of have their own mess in their lives that they're dealing with, but you also see like the overlaps of like how the siblings interact with each other, how the parents treat each of the siblings, or how they feel about their relationship with their parents, how they view situations that have happened. You see sort of like references or scenes from the past and things that have happened, and then you see sort of like how other people interpreted those situations or viewed those situations and things along those lines. It's a story about family secrets. It's a story about like immigrant families and the American dream and what's expectations are for kids of immigrants and things along those lines. I think it handles like sibling relationships so well, which I feel like is something that's really difficult to get right. Like everyone in this family has their own mess that they're working through, and sometimes that overlaps with like how they either treat other people or how they're treated. I love the way that they looked at Sola's like sort of relationship with her parents, the complications around that. I will say some of the plot developments that happen later on in the book, like I got it, but I also was just like very upset that that was the way the author chose to tell the story, which isn't necessarily a knock. It just like, it felt like real people having to deal with real consequences. I was like, oh, why did that have to happen, you know? And it's about sort of like coming to terms with like family secrets and individual secrets, and being honest about who you are and allowing that side of yourself show to your family. It's so well done. This is a book I highly recommend. I have a strong feeling it's going to be on my favorite books of the year at the end of the year, because it was so strong. It like immediately gripped me. The fact that I enjoyed all of the characters in this book, enjoyed is probably a strong word because some of them are quite infuriating, but like I understood their perspectives. I didn't like hate being in their POVs or anything along those lines. They all felt worthwhile. They all had like a purpose and a point. And yeah, just really enjoyed this. I did feel like the ending was a little easy, so to speak, in some of the resolutions, but I didn't mind it overall. I think overall I would rate this like a 4.25 stars, and I would highly recommend this one to other people. Next up, I picked up Yesteryear by Caro Burke. This feels like the buzzy book of the spring, and I felt like I'd been hearing so many people talk about it that I just like put it on hold in my library, and you know, it came up as available, so I decided to pick it up and give it a read. If you aren't aware of the synopsis of this book, you are following this woman named Natalie, who's basically like a trad wife influencer, where like behind the scenes, not everything is quite as like beautiful and easy, obviously, as it comes across on social media. And then she sort of ends up back in time in like the 1850s, 1860s sort of world, and is sort of like forced to live the life of like the world that she sort of like glorifies on her social media, is like the basic idea. So this book actually pleasantly surprised me overall. Like I said, it's a pretty buzzy book. I went into it pretty skeptical about whether or not I would like it, because I feel like a lot of times with buzzier books, either the writing doesn't work for me, or like a point of view that I really can't stand, or something along those lines that really, something just always irritates me. So I went into this one, I was like very, again, like pleasantly surprised by how engrossed I was immediately found with this story. The way the chapters are set up, you are either following Natalie in sort of like the modern day, like 2020s, you know, like 2025, 2026 sort of world, or you are following her in like the 1850s, 1860s sort of world. I will say like the 1850s, 1860s stuff, although it was like, you see everything sort of come together as in a point. The part that I was really interested in was like the exploration of like her modern life, so to speak. Like I really enjoy the way the author set up Natalie's point of view. Like this book is satirical, obviously, so she's very like an over the top extreme version of the sort of like trad wife influencers that they are talking about. But it's very interesting to see sort of like the dualities of her life and her perspectives. Like seeing how smart and capable she is. You know, she ends up going to an Ivy League school and things like that, but also has these very like conservative points of views about like what women should and shouldn't be doing, what men should and shouldn't be doing, things along those lines. Seeing the contrast between her and her husband. And it's just like a very, like, I found all of that so interesting. I feel like that this book covers like early motherhood really well. Seeing sort of how Natalie handles like her first kid and like the struggles she goes through and things along those lines, I thought were like really, really interesting. Maybe I say that because I am a relatively new mom. Not that I had the same experiences, but I found like her point of view very like realistic. If you are someone who's like gone through like postpartum anxiety or postpartum depression, things like that, I feel like the dualities of Natalie are just like what's I found really, really fascinating. And there's a lot of really interesting discussions in here about the contrarianation, not just of trad wives, but also of like liberal women and the things that they think and the things that they say and all that stuff. And, you know, there's probably a broader conversation to be had about the impacts of capitalism and the patriarchy in terms of like all of these women's lives. Yeah, I found like the modern day stuff really, really interesting. I will say like the ending fell a little bit flat for me. The way things went, I didn't fully see it coming, but it also felt like the only realistic way it could have gone without getting into spoilers. And I would love to talk about this book with other people. Like, I feel like this is the perfect book club book because there's so much to unpack here. And I feel like it's like, from what I've seen online, this has been a very like divisive book, and I can understand why, but I feel like there's a lot to talk about here for sure. And it would be really fun to sort of like unpack the ending with other people, because there's parts of it that are like really clever and parts of it that were really infuriating and just like, yeah, really honestly positive experience with this book. I'm not going to rate it like super highly. Like, I don't think it's a 4 or 5 star book. I think it's probably closer to 3.5 stars for me. I will say like the ending really brought it down, but I think that there's like a lot of really interesting discussions that the author sort of like touches on throughout the course of this book. Not that it goes like super deep. It's a very like plot heavy book. Like, I found it very engaging. It was very quick to read for me personally. So if you're looking for really deep conversations or discussions on these topics, then you might be a little bit disappointed. But I think for a very like plot heavy book, there are some very interesting topics that the author touches upon, which I really enjoyed. And the final book I finished this month was The Last Contract of Isako by Fonda Lee. This is a book that I was very intrigued by because I read the Greenbone Saga, which was Jade War. I have them right there. Was it Jade City, Jade War, Jade Legacy? I really like that series a lot. And I'm not someone who reads a lot of like fantasy, urban fantasy, things along those lines. And so when I saw that she had a new book out, I was like, okay, I definitely want to check this out. This is actually a science fiction book. You are following this woman named Isako, who is this like legendary swordswoman, kind of like a samurai type of woman. And she has this sort of like exclusive lifelong contract with a client, but that client unexpectedly dies, and so she's kind of left afloat, and she finds out that her client actually like transferred her contract to another person, and that person won't release her from her contract until she completes like one last mission. And part of that mission is to look into this man named Uchi, who is about to be like confirmed to this board, and trying to stop him from getting confirmed. And she realizes that his sort of like assistant or along those lines was like Isako's last intern or apprentice, and he has suddenly gone missing as well. And so she gets really like wound up in what is going on with her old apprentice, like where has he gone, what's going on with him, as well as trying to dig up some dirt on Uchi in order to stop him from being confirmed on the board. And like as she looks into this, like things get crazy. So I went into the book like pretty blind. I didn't even know like this full synopsis. Honestly, I basically just knew this was like a samurai woman on her last contract before she's done with her career. But there's actually quite a bit going on here. It takes place in like another world. Like it's like basically like a colony of Earth that has been cut off from Earth for reasons we don't fully know about. It's kind of has like a corporate espionage sort of edge to it, as like Isako is looking into this person and trying to figure out what's going on at his company, what's going on with her old apprentice. I would say it's kind of like light science fiction because it doesn't really get into any of the science of it all. So if you're like a heavy or hard science fiction reader, I don't necessarily know if this is for you. Talks a lot about sort of like the power and protection provided to the rich and what they are allowed to do compared to the people that they employ. You know, the samurais live by this code, and sort of like what are the sacrifices you must make in order to live by that code, what it looks like when you think you're living by the code but you're really like pursuing your own self-interest, things along those lines. And is like all of this that you are working towards or fighting for worth dying for, and things along those lines. I loved Isako as a character. I will say, like, this book is on the longer side for the books that I typically read. It's pretty standard, I would probably think, for like a fantasy SFF book, because it's like in the 500 to 600 page range. So in the beginning I wasn't really sure where it was going, and then like it gets to this climax and I'm like, we're already here, we still have like a lot of book left. And then I realized it switches perspectives. And again, typically not someone who enjoys the perspective switches, but I think that the way this book is structured is done really, really well. The plot developments, the plot twists, never would have seen them coming. No, I don't think anyone could see them coming, partially because it has to do with science fiction. And so there's no real way to expect some of these outcomes. But I honestly thought that everything was really, really well developed. I think that if you're someone who enjoys these sort of like low fantasy, low science fiction books, you might end up liking this one. I think that, again, Fonda creates really compelling characters that you end up caring about. At least that's how I felt about, you know, Jade City and Jade War and all that stuff. Like, I really love the family in that book, and I think in this book she creates another great set of characters that you end up caring a lot about. Parts of it are heartbreaking. I believe that it's a single book. Like, it's not going to be a series or anything along those lines. So like, if you are someone who wants to read some standalone science fiction, I think that this is a really great book. I'm pretty sure I rated this one 4 out of 5 stars. Really enjoyed my experience with it. I think Fonda is going to be like an author that I have to pick up anytime she puts out a book, because so far she's doing a great job with me. All right, so those are the 4 books that I finished in the month of May. I'm very happy with how my reading went overall, even though it felt like I didn't read a lot of books, but it's because I read one longer book, and also I was just sick, so my reading was all over the place. But yeah, let me know down in the comments below if you've read any of these books and what your thoughts were on them, especially Yesteryear, because I feel like I need to talk to more people about that book. Or if you have any questions about the books or anything along those lines, feel free to leave that down in the comment section as well. So yeah, that's all I have for now, and thanks for watching.